For decades, the tension between the United States, Israel, and Iran has simmered beneath the surface of global politics, like a fault line waiting to shift. It is not a sudden war. It is not a single explosion. It is a long story of ideology, power, security, and survival that stretches back nearly half a century. And today, as headlines flash across screens and military movements increase across the Middle East, the world once again asks the same question. How close are we to a direct confrontation? To understand the present, we must return to 1979. That was the year Iran underwent the Islamic Revolution. The Shah, who had been backed by the United States, was overthrown, and a new theocratic government led by Ayatollah Khomeini took power. From that moment, Iran's leadership framed the United States as the Great Satan and positioned itself in direct ideological opposition to Western influence. America became not just a rival, but a symbol of everything the revolution rejected. Israel, meanwhile, represented something even more profound in Iran's worldview. The Iranian regime refused to recognize Israel as a legitimate state and declared support for Palestinian resistance movements. Over time, this ideological opposition evolved into strategic action. Iran began supporting groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and later Hamas in Gaza. These groups share hostility toward Israel and have engaged in armed conflict against it. For Israel, this was not theoretical. It was existential. Israel's national security doctrine has always been shaped by one core principle: survival at all costs. Born after the Holocaust and surrounded by adversaries in its early years, Israel developed a security strategy centered on deterrence, intelligence, superiority, and preemptive action when necessary. When Iranian leaders publicly call for Israel's elimination, Israeli policymakers do not treat it as rhetoric. They treat it as a threat. The United States enters this triangle not only as Israel's closest ally, but as a global superpower with strategic interests in the Middle East. The US-Israel alliance is rooted in shared democratic values, military cooperation, and decades of political partnership. The United States provides Israel with billions of dollars in military aid annually and supports its right to defend itself. At the same time, the US has maintained a complex and often hostile relationship with Iran since the hostage crisis at the American embassy in Tehran in 1979. Over the years, the conflict between Israel and Iran has largely been indirect. It has played out through cyber attacks, covert operations, assassinations of nuclear scientists, airstrikes in Syria, and proxy wars, rather than open battlefield confrontation. But the underlying tension has never disappeared. One of the most critical flashpoints has been Iran's nuclear program. Iran insists its nuclear ambitions are peaceful and intended for energy production. Israel and the United States argue that Iran's enrichment levels and missile development suggest potential weaponization. The fear of a nuclear-armed Iran has shaped Israeli strategy for years. Israeli leaders have repeatedly stated that they will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons capability. In 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, known as the Iran Nuclear Deal, temporarily reduced tensions. Iran agreed to limit uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief. However, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement under the Trump administration, reimposing heavy sanctions. Since then, Iran has gradually increased uranium enrichment levels, bringing the issue back to the forefront of global concern. At the same time, regional conflicts have intensified. Iran has expanded its influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria targeting Iranian military positions and weapons transfers to Hezbollah. The United States has targeted Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria when American personnel were attacked. The October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel dramatically escalated tensions across the region. Israel launched a major military campaign in Gaza in response. Iran denied direct involvement but praised the attack and continued backing groups hostile to Israel. Meanwhile, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria increased attacks on US bases. The United States responded with airstrikes on militia positions, signaling that while it sought to avoid a broader war, it would defend its forces. The Red Sea also became a new front. The Houthis in Yemen, Baked B, Iran, began targeting commercial shipping, claiming solidarity with Gaza The United States formed a multinational coalition to protect maritime routes, conducting strikes against Houthi positions. Each move added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. But this alignment also carries risk. A direct war between Israel and Iran could draw on the United States immediately. Iran possesses a vast missile arsenal and influence through proxy forces across multiple countries. Hezbollah alone is believed to have tens of thousands of rockets capable of striking deep into Israeli territory. Any miscalculation could trigger a multi-front conflict. Despite fiery rhetoric and military posturing, all sides understand the cost of full-scale war. Iran's economy struggles under sanctions. Israel faces security pressure on multiple fronts. The United States remains cautious after decades of costly Middle Eastern wars. Yet deterrence is fragile. It relies on calculation, not emotion. And in a region layered with history, identity, and ideology, calculation can sometimes give way to escalation. What makes this conflict particularly dangerous is not just weapons, but worldview. Iran's leadership sees resistance to Israel and America as part of its revolutionary identity. Israel sees Iranian expansion and nuclear capability as an existential threat. The United States sees both a strategic challenge and a test of credibility among allies. The situation today is not a declared war between America, Israel, and Iran, but it is a shadow conflict fought across borders, through proxies, in cyberspace and intelligence operations, and through economic pressure. It is a slow burn with moments of sudden flare. Because if direct war ever breaks out between these three nations, it would not remain regional. Energy markets would surge. Global trade routes would be threatened. Alliances would be tested. And the consequences would ripple far beyond the Middle East. For now, the world watches carefully. Military bases remain on alert. Air defense systems track the skies. Diplomats speak in measured tones while preparing for worst-case scenarios. This is not a story of sudden conflict. It is a story decades in the making. A triangle of ideology, survival, and power that continues to define one of the most volatile regions on Earth. And the next move could shape the century.